Hello and welcome back to Rare Trains on the MBTA Worcester line. In today's episode, we have countless rare MBTA work extras, Amtrak trains, and even some CSX action. Let's get right into it. We begin in October of 2022 when the MBTA was preparing to run a system-wide federal inspection train. After CSX dropped a Federal Railroad Administration car in Worcester, the Readville Switcher was tasked with picking it up and bringing it to the MBTA's maintenance facility in Somerville. Around 3:30 in the afternoon, recently rebuilt GP40MC-3 number 1125 coasts through Wellesley Square with the lone Metroliner inspection car. A month later, after running on the MBTA's yearly Polar Express, HSP-46 number 2000 was placed onto a regular set and put into service on the Worcester line. This yearly tradition of adorning a locomotive with a wreath began just a few years ago, and it's still a nice treat to see around the holidays. Skipping 4 months ahead to April, we see the debut of the MBTA's newest cars. Ordered in late 2019, this Hyundai Rotem CTC-5 looks nearly identical to older 1800 series cars, but with updated interiors and a curious missing purple stripe on the front door, you can tell this shiny car is brand new. Hyundai Rotem cars just like this one will slowly enter service over the next few years, replacing much of the T's single-level equipment. Just 3 days later, I pulled an all-nighter on the Worcester line to see, well, just see for yourself. That's right, CSX's executive F40s on the Worcester line. On the nights of April 1st, 2nd, and 3rd, CSX tested 2 of its executive F40s on the western end of the MBTA Worcester line, hoping to get their access signaling systems in order. Amtrak's Northeast Corridor and surrounding areas use a bespoke form of positive train control known as Axis, which is infamously finicky. In preparation for the upcoming office car special tour of the newly acquired Pan Am Railways system, CSX wanted to ensure that Axis won't be acting up in their 2 F40s. Here they are getting on the move west from CP44 in Worcester. You may be wondering why I'm only just now seeing this train at 3:30 in the morning. Well, that's because the night before I went to Ashland to see this train, but they ended up only going as far east as Westboro. The next day, however, I was determined to see this rare move, heading to Grafton, a station just west of Westboro. Unfortunately, on that night, they tested entirely within Worcester Yard, meaning that I waited with a few friends at Grafton Station from 10 p.m. until 3 a.m. Finally, after 5 hours of waiting at an empty train station, we saw our opportunity to strike. To end the night, the Technical Research Special would run east to the interlocking at milepost 44, 1 mile east of Worcester, and then head west to Worcester Station to drop off the people working in the inspection car. At this point, delirium had set in, so we threw caution to the wind and went to one of the places you never want to go at 3 a.m., Worcester, Massachusetts. Just before 4 in the morning, we saw the Technical Research Special, symboled P950, pulling past the temporary platform at Worcester Station. About a week later, I was in Boston when I got word that MBTA train 526 broke down in Westboro, meaning that another train would have to come rescue it. The next inbound, 528, was coupled to the broken down 526, making what's known as a double draft. Here's 528 pushing 526's dead set on the home stretch into Boston with 2 trains worth of delayed passengers on board. A month later, on May 10th, I went out to see the eastbound Amtrak Lakeshore Limited with one special locomotive, or should I say shell of a locomotive. Right behind the P42 leading was non-powered control unit number 90213, a hollowed-out F40PH used for easy turnarounds on Amtrak's Downeaster. 90213 was coming back to Boston after routine maintenance in Albany, New York, which has a much more robust shop than Boston. On May 28th, I was out for Amtrak again, this time knowing it had nothing special. What I learned though is that sometimes it's not the train, but the circumstances that make for a good catch. In early June, after being equipped with Axis, the unique signaling system I was talking about earlier, Amtrak 130, the Phase 2 Heritage Unit, returned to Boston for the first time in quite a few years. Here it is trailing third on a slow-moving 448. This unit has since led the Lakeshore to Boston quite a few times, but I haven't been lucky enough to catch it. At the end of June, quite a bit of word was going around that the MBTA would be running so-called wire trains in the near future. These trains would operate on every MBTA line to move wayside PTC wires underground for protection from the elements. This massive undertaking was projected to take several years, meaning that the MBTA would need to lease dedicated equipment to operate these wire trains. Over the course of the summer, piece by piece, the wire train would be built. The first equipment to come to Massachusetts were 2 locomotives, PNLX 9619, a refurbished GP40-2LW, and PNLX 2107, a unique MPI MP20 GP-3. These 2 engines are on lease to the MBTA from Precision Locomotive Leasing, a company based out of Virginia. Here they are being pulled into Boston by a revenue set based out of Southampton Street Yard. Definitely not something you see every day. Around the same time that the leasers arrived, the cars used to drop wires would show up in air, and finally the last piece of the train would show up in July. Once again, here's the Readville Switcher, which is usually the train used for moves like this one, bringing a leased caboose from the CSX interchange in Framingham into the city. Obviously, seeing a caboose in 2023 is quite a rare sight, but to see one on the Worcester line being pulled by a long hood forward Mass-Dod Jeep makes this even cooler. If you're wondering, this is what the fully assembled wire train looks like. Here's a picture I took of it in Littleton just a few days before I left for college. Perhaps next time I'm home in Massachusetts, I'll be able to see this fascinating train in action. Finally, on July 30th, I chased the much talked about Readville Switcher. This time, instead of seeing it picking up equipment in Framingham or Worcester, I'm seeing its routine operation, moving equipment between the north and south sides. On most Sundays, one can expect the Readville Switcher to make an appearance on the Worcester line right around 1 p.m., and today is no exception. Here's the Switcher shoving an HSP-46 locomotive to the turnout at milepost 3.3. After manually throwing the switch, the Readville Switcher backs onto the Grand Junction running track, which runs up to the commuter rail maintenance facility in Somerville. Unlike most commuter rail systems in North America, the MBTA commuter rail is split into two sides, connected only by one track through Cambridge. Speaking of Cambridge, this place is really cool. It's super walkable and has bike lanes everywhere. This, in addition to slow-moving trains and gateless crossings, means that chasing the Switcher by bike is not only possible, but relatively easy. Here's the Switcher getting underway on the junction. Continuing the chase through Cambridge, we were able to pace the lead locomotive, GP40MC number 1119. Though they were common system-wide just a few years ago, these 50-plus-year-old engines have recently been delegated to the north side exclusively, with the exception of non-revenue trains such as this one. After ending our chase right near Kendall Square, we prepared for the Readville Switcher to return, which only took about half an hour. Here goes the southbound move at Main Street in Cambridge. We rushed back towards the Worcester line, catching them one more time on the Grand Junction. About 20 minutes later, we saw them one final time at Lansdowne before calling it a day. Now one could say that this was not really a rare train, which is pretty true, and it's not entirely on the Worcester line, which is also true. However, to that I say, I don't know where else I would have uploaded this footage, and it fits the bill just well enough that I don't feel bad including it in here. Anyways, that's the end of this episode of Rare Trains on the Worcester line, which may become a thing of the past. Nowadays I'm away at college, but luckily I'll still do a bit of rail fanning from time to time. Perhaps in the near future you'll be seeing rare trains on the NS Pittsburgh line. So stay tuned for that, and as always, thanks for watching.